rubbish, and that just shows why he isn't, no, he's nobody. Simple as that.
Adrian Lewis might be a two-time world champion, but he's made nearly as many enemies as trophies. From explosive walk-offs to backstage brawls, Lewis has clashed with some of the biggest names in darts, and not all of them walked away quietly. So who made his blood boil the most? You're about to find out, and some of these names will seriously surprise you. Adrian Lewis was just 21 when he found himself under the bright lights of the 2006 PDC World Championship quarterfinals. The pressure was enormous, the stakes even higher, but what happened that night had little to do with darts and everything to do with one man, Peter Manley. Manley, already a veteran of the game and infamous for winding up his opponents, didn't just play darts, he played mind games. As the match wore on, Lewis started to crack. He claimed Manley was deliberately walking slowly to disrupt his rhythm, muttering just loud enough to distract, and doing everything in his power to get under his skin. The crowd didn't know it at the time, but tensions were boiling behind the scenes. Then came the moment that made darts history. Lewis, visibly fuming, stormed off the stage mid-match after losing a set. No handshake, no eye contact, just a cold exit that sent a message louder than any dart ever could. He wasn't going to play Manley's game. It was shocking, especially coming from a young player still earning his stripes on the professional circuit. But to Lewis, it was about principle. He later revealed that he felt completely disrespected, calling Manley's behavior disgraceful and accusing him of trying to sabotage the integrity of the match. Manley, of course, brushed off the allegations, playing the role of the misunderstood veteran. But fans weren't buying it. The fallout was instant. Commentators, players, and fans were split down the middle. Was Lewis being immature, or was Manley really pushing things too far? Either way, it cemented a rivalry that would never truly heal. Even years later, when Lewis was asked to name the most controversial figures in darts, Manley's name came up without hesitation. What started as a match quickly became a feud, and for Lewis, it was the beginning of a pattern. Because while Peter Manley may have been the first to spark Adrian's fury, he definitely wasn't the last. And the next one didn't just involve words, it nearly led to a ban. If Peter Manley rattled Adrian Lewis with mind games, Kevin Painter took things to a whole new level, one that nearly cost Lewis his career. It was 2008, at the Holland Masters quarterfinals. The match between Lewis and Painter was tense from the first dart, but what happened after the final throw stole all the headlines. As Lewis exited the stage, he suddenly doubled back. He made a beeline for Painter, and in front of stunned officials and fans, the two nearly came to blows. Words were exchanged, loud, heated, and unfiltered. Neither man backed down. And while cameras didn't catch the full confrontation, reports from those present painted a clear picture. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was personal. The Professional Darts Corporation didn't hesitate. Lewis was slapped with a 6-month suspended ban and a hefty fine. He issued a public apology, but the bad blood between him and Painter didn't cool off. In fact, years later, when asked who the biggest villains in darts were, Lewis didn't flinch. He dropped Painter's name immediately.
You're a better villain than Adrian Lewis. Kevin Painter.
Yes. 100% yes.
I've still got so...
Even ahead of others with much more public controversy. But it's what he said next that really showed how deep the resentment went. Lewis admitted he should have never let Painter get under his skin, but also said on the record that he'd never forgiven the guy. The grudge had lingered, buried just beneath the surface, for over a decade. For fans, the incident showed a side of Lewis they hadn't seen before: raw, impulsive, and fiery. Some admired the passion, others saw it as a dangerous edge, but everyone agreed on one thing. This wasn't just a clash of egos, it was a full-on rivalry, and it had nearly derailed one of darts' most promising careers. But if Lewis thought that was the last time he'd be dragged into controversy, he had no idea what was coming next. The next name on the list? A loudmouth Welshman who wasn't afraid to bite back. By 2016, Adrian Lewis had built a name as one of darts' most explosive talents, but also as someone who didn't exactly keep his opinions to himself. So when he faced off against a brash, rising Welsh star named Gerwyn Price at the World Match Play, it wasn't just a match, it was a clash of egos. From the moment the first dart was thrown, the tension was obvious. Price, known for his loud celebrations and aggressive demeanor,
Really wanted to kind of pacify the situation. Gerwin's having none of it. He's ready for the fight.
was already getting under people's skin on the circuit. But Lewis wasn't just annoyed, he was furious. After their match, which Lewis won, he didn't hold back. Cameras caught him saying bluntly, "He's a nobody." That wasn't just trash talk, it was personal. And Price, never one to take a hit quietly, fired back. He clapped back on social media, mocking Lewis's attitude and hinting that he lacked the respect to handle the pressure. From that point on, every encounter between the two was laced with tension. Fans began picking sides. Some loved Price's fire. Others backed Lewis as the more seasoned pro being disrespected by a loudmouth newcomer. Either way, darts now had a rivalry that felt less like sport and more like personal warfare. And it didn't die down with time. Interviews, tweets, and subtle jabs kept it alive long after that first fiery match. Even when they weren't playing each other, you could feel the frost in the air when they shared a stage. But what makes this feud even crazier? Gerwin Price wasn't the only frenemy Adrian had on stage. His next rival was once his mentor, until everything fell apart. At one point, Adrian Lewis wasn't just inspired by Phil Taylor, he was trained by him. Groomed by the greatest player in darts history, Lewis was seen as the next heir to the throne. They practiced together, traveled together, and for a while, Lewis was dubbed the Power's protege. But if there's one thing Lewis hates, it's being in someone else's shadow. Over time, that mentor-student dynamic began to crack. Lewis became more vocal about distancing himself from Taylor's influence. He didn't want to be the next Phil Taylor. He wanted to be the first Adrian Lewis. In interviews, he pushed back against the protege label, saying he never wanted to be a copy of anyone. He wanted to stand on his own. And then came the matches. Fierce, high-stakes showdowns where respect was pushed aside. In 2013, during the Grand Slam of Darts, a visibly irritated Taylor accused Lewis of unsportsmanlike behavior mid-match. The tension on stage was undeniable, and fans could feel the animosity. These weren't friendly rivals anymore. This was a fractured relationship playing out in real time. What made it worse was how public it became. Interviews, subtle digs, and body language told the story. Taylor spoke less and less about Lewis as a successor. Lewis stopped giving credit to Taylor for his rise. What started as admiration turned into something colder, more competitive, even bitter. And while they never had a full-on explosion like with Manley or Painter, the distance between them became painfully obvious. For Lewis, the breakup with Taylor wasn't just personal, it was symbolic. He wasn't the student anymore. He was the threat. But if you thought that relationship soured, the next one went nuclear and ended with one of the most savage insults in darts history. When you're one of the best in the world, rivalries are inevitable. But this one crossed the line into outright hostility. Adrian Lewis and Michael van Gerwen were never exactly friends, but what Van Gerwen said in 2022 shocked everyone. In a jaw-dropping interview, Van Gerwen called Lewis the biggest cheater in darts, not one of, but the biggest. That comment didn't just raise eyebrows, it blew up across the darts world. Fans, pundits, and even other players jumped into the debate, wondering what exactly Van Gerwen was talking about. He later clarified, kind of. According to Van Gerwen, Lewis had a habit of disruptive tactics. Things like loud foot stomps during an opponent's throw, random talking or coughing at just the wrong time, and staring down players on the oche. All of it subtle enough to avoid penalties, but obvious enough to drive opponents mad. Lewis denied it all. He called the claims pathetic, chalking it up to jealousy or bitterness from Van Gerwen, who he accused of being arrogant and insecure whenever things didn't go his way. The two exchanged digs in interviews and online for months. The tension became so thick that fans started watching matches between them just to see if something would boil over. Unlike some of Lewis's older grudges, this one didn't fade with time. It escalated. And while no physical altercation ever happened, the verbal shots between them were some of the harshest in modern darts. And if you thought words were bad, Lewis's next feud crossed the line completely and nearly ended in disaster. By 2018, Lewis's career was already surrounded by controversy. But what happened at the UK Open qualifier that year took things to a new level. During a match against Spanish player Jose Justicia, the tension snapped. Cameras caught Lewis physically confronting Justicia at the end of the match. No one knew exactly what was said, but the body language spoke volumes, and it wasn't good. Justicia stood stunned as Lewis pressed into his space, clearly angry. Officials had to step in, separating the two before things escalated even further. The Darts Regulation Authority launched an immediate investigation. The result? A fine, a suspension, and a public apology from Lewis, who said he was embarrassed by his actions and admitted he lost control. But even in that apology, there was a twist. He hinted that Justicia had provoked him, saying there was more going on behind the scenes than people realized. Fans were split. Some felt Lewis had gone too far, crossing a line that can't be uncrossed. Others blamed pressure, years of built-up frustration, and a lack of support behind the scenes. But one thing was certain, this wasn't just a hothead moment. It was the boiling point of a career defined by confrontation. From mind games to accusations to full-on physical tension, Lewis's career has been shadowed by clashes with players he just couldn't stand. But these weren't just petty rivalries. They were raw, unpredictable, and often explosive. Adrian Lewis didn't just face opponents, he faced conflict. From storming off mid-match to nearly coming to blows, he's left a trail of feuds that have shaped how fans and players see him. And while some view him as a passionate competitor who stood his ground, others see a hothead who let his temper burn bridges faster than he could build a legacy. But here's the thing, you don't win 2 world titles without fire. Maybe those rivalries weren't distractions. Maybe they were fuel. Every clash, every insult, every stare-down might have been exactly what kept Lewis pushing forward in a game that demands more than just skill. It demands edge. Still, it makes you wonder, if he'd kept his cool, would he have won more? Or was the chaos part of what made him great?